voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Taib Zitouni, has called in the Bahraini capital, Manama, for intensifying efforts in order to achieve Arab economic integration and broaden commercial and investment cooperation ahead of the holding next Thursday of the Arab League Summit. Algeria has hailed the adoption by the vast majority of the UN General Assembly of a resolution supporting the right of the State of Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations. As the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the rapid enforcement of a ceasefire in Gaza, new airstrikes were today launched by the Israeli army on various parts of the enclave. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. At the outset, the first consultative meeting between the leaders of Algeria, Tunisia and Libya constitutes an important step towards the implementation of a new mechanism for the countries of the region, thus adding to the successive victories won by the Algerian diplomacy, according to the Al Jaish magazine. Majid Mila has more details in this report.
In its May editorial, the magazine Al Jaish underlined the holding of the consultative meeting, the first of the kind, between the leaders of the three countries in Tunisia on April 22, 2024, emphasizing that this approach taking place in a sensitive regional situation, particularly in light of the serious development at the regional level and unprecedented crises at the international level, which require the coordination of positions between the countries of the Arab Maghreb, as well as the consolidation of efforts, the deepening and intensification of consultations in order to effectively address the numerous political, security and economic challenges. This proves Algeria's commitment to encouraging common collective action, notes the magazine, adding that the idea of this important meeting comes from the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, who insisted on numerous occasions on the need to find a regular and periodic consultation mechanism, in particular for the countries of North Africa, which would work to provide appropriate solutions to the problems they face. This mechanism should protect the region from the real threats surrounding it and strengthen the foundations of its security, stability and the development. Meanwhile, the magazine assures that the National People's Army, worthy heir of the National Liberation Army, continues to accomplish its missions of defense of the nation with dedication and sincerity, highlighting the resounding success crowning the execution of the various exercises with live ammunition, the latest of which was supervised by Army General Said Shangriha, Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, during his visit to the 3rd Military Region.
And the Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Taib Zitouni, has called in the Bahraini capital, Manama, for intensifying efforts in order to achieve Arab economic integration and broaden commercial and investment cooperation. Mariam Barshi has more.
His speech during the preparatory ministerial meeting of the Arab Economic and Social Council ahead of the 33rd ordinary session of the Arab Summit to be held next Thursday in Manama, Bahrain, the minister underlined that Arab countries should work together to achieve the desired Arab economic integration and the sustainable development through building a solid economic foundation for Arab countries. Mr. Zitouni expressed on the occasion Algeria's aspiration to enhance the Arab region, which could play a crucial role in the era of globalization in achieving social and economic development. He stressed that Arab nations are putting great hopes on the recommendation of this summit, especially amid the dire circumstances prevailing in the world, foremost among which the genocide perpetrated against the Palestinian people, pointing out to Algeria's relentless efforts, which stem from its first and historic positions in support for the Palestinian cause, backed by the instructions of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and which were crowned with the recent recognition of the right of Palestine to full UN membership. Earlier, the Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Tayyip Zitouni, was received in Manama by the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Bahrain Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Samir Abdullah Nes, and members of the Chamber with whom he examined ways and means to strengthen bilateral economic cooperation. Mr. Zitouni was welcomed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well as the Algerian ambassador to Bahrain. It's worth recalling that the preparatory meetings for the 33rd session of the League of Arab States kicked off yesterday in Manama under the chairmanship of Bahrain and with the participation of Algeria's permanent delegation to the Arab League. The meeting will examine, among other items, the report of the Secretary-General of the Arab League on the social and developmental joint Arab action and the emergency plan to face up to the economic and social developments, as well as the Zionist aggression on Palestine. The participant will also take stock of the progress made as part of the implementation of the Free Arab Trade Area and the creation of the Arab Customs Union.
And the African Summit on Fertilizers and Soil Health, held in Nairobi, has ended with the adoption of Algeria's proposal to support the efforts of gas producers and the declaration of the 7th Summit of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum hosted by Algeria last March to encourage the production of gas as an essential substance in the production of agriculture fertilizers. Mariam Barshi again.
The meeting, which took place from May 7 to 9th, with the participation of the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Youssef Sharfa, representing the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, culminated in a final declaration. The Nairobi Declaration called for sustainable solutions to the problems of agricultural land and lack of fertilizers, in line with the 2023-2033 Action Plan, which met the aspirations of African people to achieve food security. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, underlined in a speech read on his behalf by the Minister of Agriculture at the opening of the summit the pioneering role of Algeria in fertilizer production, taking into account its production capacities, which allow it to meet the needs of the local market and to supply the global market. The President of the Republic affirmed that Algeria intends to continue its efforts to develop natural gas, which is an important element in the manufacture of the main fertilizers, through the strengthening of direct investments in the field of oil and gas. Organized by the African Union and the government of the Republic of Kenya, the Nairobi summit was held following the decision of the 37th Conference of Heads of State and Government of the African Union, held in Addis Ababa on the 17th and 18th February 2024. The summit, which took place in the presence of official delegations and officials from international and regional organizations, aims to bring together all parties and stakeholders concerned to highlight the role of fertilizers and soil health in stimulating sustainable and favorable growth of agriculture in Africa.
And still with the domestic file, Algeria has hailed the adoption by the vast majority of the UN General Assembly of a resolution supporting the right of the State of Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations Organization. A communique issued by the Foreign Ministry here, Algeria stressed that Algeria stressed that the adoption of this historic resolution confirms the international consensus reached over 3 clear political messages sent to the Israeli occupation authorities. These are related notably to the absolute necessity to establish a Palestinian state away from any manipulation or controversy and in line with the efforts made to achieve the creation of the Palestinian state. The creation of the Palestinian state must be the starting point and the aim of any serious political process aimed at achieving a just and lasting settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The international community does not recognize the Israeli occupation authorities the right to oppose the establishment of the Palestinian state because, as it is the result of an irreproachable international consensus which the occupation power can neither neglect nor oppose. The communique reiterated that Algeria will pursue its efforts within the Security Council in full coordination with its Palestinian and other Arab brothers and with all the member states that support the Palestinian cause in order to back the international consensus on the creation of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state as the only means to settle the Palestinian issue and to restore peace, security and stability in the Middle East region. And to the Middle East now, where as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the rapid enforcement of a ceasefire in Gaza, new airstrikes were today launched by the Israeli army against various parts of the enclave. Palestinian sources said 18 people, including 2 doctors, were killed and 3 other people were wounded in the Israeli bombardment, which hit notably the central areas of Nusayrat, Deir al-Balah and Jabalia in the northern part of Gaza. More raids were carried out today by the Israeli army against the eastern outskirts of Rafah, where about 2.4 million displaced had sought refuge. The Israeli authorities have ordered the population to evacuate the region ahead of operations they intend to launch in the neighboring areas of Rafah. In this respect, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, underlined that the last evacuations affected nearly 1 million people in Rafah who have no safe area to go in Gaza. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, the entry of humanitarian aid has been significantly hampered since the Israeli soldiers entered Rafah's eastern part and seized control of the town's crossing point with Egypt. The Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders organization, for its part affirmed that the Israeli operations in Rafah had made it impossible to provide a vital medical care. This came as UN Secretary General reiterated his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and for an increase in humanitarian aid. Addressing an international conference of donors in Kuwait, he stressed that a ceasefire would be just the beginning of a path, which he pointed out would be very long before recovering from the devastation and trauma of such a war. In the meantime, protests were staged in several countries across Europe and elsewhere to press for an end to Israel's attacks on Gaza. Thousands of people demonstrated in the U.S., notably in Michigan, Washington, Baltimore, and also in the Spanish capital, Madrid, to express their support for the Palestinians. And the Minister of Religious Affairs and Endowments of Waqf, Yusuf Belmehdi, is taking part as from tomorrow, the 13th and the 14th in Istanbul, Turkey, in the World Dialogue Meeting of Muslims or Muslim ulamas or scholars. And finally, more than 330 people have been killed by flash floods in the Baghlan, Takhar, and Badakhshan and Ghor provinces in Afghanistan. Local sources added that the floods wounded 117 people. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme stressed that more than 1,000 homes were destroyed in the Baghlan province alone. With this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Now, time for our weekly program, starting with a special program on the development projects of the New Algeria, which have taken in record time important steps for the preservation of the dignity of citizens, the fulfillment of the principle of social justice, the achievement of balanced development in all regions of the country, in addition to the defense of Algeria's interests abroad. Majid Mila has more details in this report.
In its third and final episode, the documentary entitled New Algeria, Vision and Achievements, broadcast by the Algerian television, and highlights the most important achievements made in recent years and the commitments that were taken by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, materialized on the ground in accordance with the social character of the Algerian government as provided for in the Declaration of November 1st, 1954. The documentary shed light on the grey areas development program launched in 2021 across the country's different provinces, and which includes many important vital projects in various sectors with the aim of boosting development in isolated zones as part to safeguard the dignity of citizens and their right to a decent life. It also highlighted the most important development projects promoted in isolated areas in the eastern Khenchla province through the special complementary development program ordered by the President of the Republic, which includes the implementation of several structuring and major infrastructure projects, including one new railway line linking the province to the national railway network and a road splitting project which has turned it into an economic access linking the north to the south, in addition to the construction construction of several housing projects under various formats. In Tamarasset, a province located in the southern part of Algeria, the optical fiber line mega project works along the National Road No. 1, RN1, have been completed. The project, part of the Trans-Saharan backbone and carried out by National Skills and Capacities, will connect these regions of the country to the internet network, which will extend in the future to the rest of neighboring African countries. The documentary also addressed the great recovery in the housing sector, which since 2020 has seen the delivery of more than 1,250 units with different formulas, according to the General Director of Housing at the Ministry of Housing, Urban Planning at the city, Mohammed Morjani. He added that the year 2024 is a decisive year for the housing sector, the government having committed to carrying out a very ambitious program, including 460,000 housing units and more than 150,000 housing in support of rural populations, whose distribution was ordered by the President to ensure regional balance between different regions of the country. For his part, the Director General of the Algerian National Housing Promotion Agency, ADL, Fouad Mokrani, announced that over the last 4 years, and then within the framework of the ADL2 program, which is in the last phase of implementation, more than 400,000 units housing were delivered to the different provinces of the country. On the other hand, the documentary highlighted the main measures adopted by the government in favor of the national community abroad. The Director General of the National Skills Abroad of the Ministry at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Mohammed Saudi, noted in this regard that the government grants major attention to the diaspora and works to promote its participation in national development. At the same time, Algerian diplomacy has recently experienced intense activity, which has led to its strong return to international fora and the recovery of its position that benefits it as a regional power within its geopolitical space and as a main actor in the issues relating to the restoration of international security and peace, having recorded numerous successes in regional and international fora.
And before moving on to the international event of the week, let's remind you the major headlines. The Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Taib Zitouni, has called on the Bahraini capital Manama for intensifying efforts in order to achieve Arab economic integration and broaden commercial and investment cooperation ahead of the holding next Thursday of the Arab League Summit. Algeria has hailed the adoption by the vast majority of the UN General Assembly of a resolution supporting the right of the State of Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations. And as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the rapid enforcement of a ceasefire in Gaza, new airstrikes were today launched by the Israeli army on various parts of the enclave. That's the end of the news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, the international event of the week, devoted this week to the situation prevailing in the occupied Palestinian territories. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you.
The international event of the week.
The Israeli army expanded this week its military operations in Rafah despite warnings by the international community that the Israeli attacks on Gaza's southern part would lead to humanitarian disaster. Humanitarian organization warned that the Israeli military operation launched on the eastern outskirts of Gaza's southern city would deprive more than 1 million people who sought refuge in Rafah of health care. The Israeli authorities have ordered the evacuation of the population of the eastern areas of Rafah towards an expanded humanitarian area linking the Al-Mawasi to Deir al-Balah in the central part of the Gaza Strip, which has been under the Israeli bombardments. According to UNRWA, 110,000 Palestinians have fled Rafah since the Israeli army intensified its attacks on the city. Asked on whether the main objective of the Israeli government's plan to expand its military operation in Rafah was to turn the Gaza Strip into an uninhabited area, our political analyst Hamid Salhi had this.
Things are better today than they were prior to October 7. The United States eventually will have to accept the reality that a lasting peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without a full recognition of the Palestinians to exist in independent state and free. The United States cannot sustain the damage inflicted to its image worldwide. And with the United States being seen as complicit in the genocide perpetrated against the Palestinians, and continuing to refuse to accept the right to Palestinians to live as a human, cannot do this while continuing to push others to follow its democratic norms. Continuing on this path is certainly devastating for the United States. Strategically and image-wise, the United States stand to lose the hearts and mind, if it hasn't already did, worldwide. Similarly, when it comes to United States allies in the region, they cannot continue paying blind support for the United States and the Zionist states without coming to terms with their own people who unconditionally support Palestine. Contextually, therefore, the United States' recognition of a Palestinian state is a matter of time. The Palestinian resistance and efforts led by supporters of Palestine, including Algeria, South Africa, and others, will eventually force the United States to come to terms with reality and reverse its position in the United Nations Security Council. This is a matter of time.
US President Joe Biden warned that the US would stop supplying some weapons to Israel in case a large-scale operation was launched on Rafah. He was quoted by American media as saying that the US administration made it clear to the Israeli Prime Minister and the War Cabinet that they will lose the US support if an assault is launched on Rafah. President Joe Biden, who acknowledged that the US weapons had been used by the Israeli army to kill civilians in Gaza, recently decided to delay the delivery of thousands of bombs to Israel. The delay of the delivery of ammunition was confirmed by the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin while testifying before the Senate. Asked if President Biden, who is confronted to a divided electoral base, had no other leverage than to threaten to suspend arms supplies to Israel, a move which is not unprecedented, as the same decision was taken in the early 80s concerning Lebanon to force it to stop its attacks on Gaza this time. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had the following.
American President Joe Biden's latest position is short on substance, and it is designed for public relations, no more, no less. President Biden has not reversed his actions from supporting Israel, while he appears to take a new position against the Zionist states. He stopped short from demanding Israel for a ceasefire, has put no pressure on Israel to accept the latest agreement that Hamas, in which the United States was part of the negotiation team, and he gives a way out to Israel by putting conditions on his own position that if Israel carries out its genocide in Rafah with precision and a clear strategy, he would not he would reverse this latest position, meaning that he would continue to support Israel. This amounts to an operation that would lead to the same result: killing and putting in danger more than 1 million people in Gaza. This is how others describe the American position as amounting to a slow death of Palestinians. He seems, in this regard, to accept this approach. President Biden could have done better, or could do better. Since October 7, Israel has signed more than 100 armed agreements to support this genocide. He can put an end to those agreements. The United States has also has also supplied precision weapons that Israel uses to demolish building infrastructures and kill civilians. There, he too can stop them, stop selling them. And finally, he could stop funding Israel.
The UN General Assembly voted a resolution this week endorsing the Palestinians' bid to become a fully fledged member of the UN. The resolution recognizes the Palestinian state as a qualified to join the UN and urges the UN Security Council to reconsider its decision and re-examine the Palestinians' membership request. The Palestinians reactivated their bid to become a UN member after it was vetoed last month by the UN Security Council. The Palestinian mission to the UN held the decision as a clear and reaffirmed support to the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, including the right to set up their independent state. Asked if there were any change in the US position on the issue, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
Turning Gaza inhabitable is designed to create facts on the ground for Israel to achieve its grand strategic goal of mass deportation and the resettlement of Jewish settlements in Gaza, which Israel evacuated decades ago. As Los Angeles Times reported recently, driving 2 million from their homes, destroying critical infrastructure and bulldozing huge swaths of land entirely. These new facts on the ground will render Gaza inhabitable by the time the guns fall silent, leaving no other option but mass deportation, as reported in Los Angeles Times. According to the same newspaper, this approach, which was virtually impossible to undo, was carried out by Israel in 1970s with its rapid construction of settlements on Palestinian territory, which were widely illegal under international law. And in 1948, when settlers flocked to Palestine and the establishment of communities known as kibbutz. The settlement, according to the paper, were crucial in creating permanent conditions for the creation and later expansion of the Zionist state.
Let's recall that the Palestinian state is considered a non-member observer state since 2012, when it was granted such a status by the UN General Assembly that implies a de facto recognition of statehood.
Declared a national park in 2003, the Jebel Aisa National Park covers an area of around